Captain Lena Hart pushed open the heavy wooden door of the small bar near Fort Carson, seeking nothing more than a night off. 6 months of deployment in remote desert zones had left her drained, her mind filled with memories she hadn't yet processed. A simple night of laughter, soft music, and a drink with her friends seemed almost like a luxury. She hoped for invisibility. She didn't want attention. Tonight, she was just Lena, not a special forces captain, not a highly trained operative who had led countless high-risk missions overseas. The bar smelled of old beer and fried food, a mix Lena found oddly comforting. The crowd was loud, mostly soldiers off duty, unwinding in the dim light. She scanned the room for a place to sit, spotting a corner booth near the back, quiet enough to avoid unnecessary attention, yet close enough to hear the conversations around her. Her two closest friends, Sarah and Mia, were already seated, waving her over. She smiled softly and made her way through the crowd. The chatter was relentless. Soldiers boasting about training exercises, recounting near misses during drills, or sharing exaggerated war stories. Lena tuned most of it out, letting herself sink into the background. She preferred observation over interaction in social settings, instinct from years of field work. Her movements were deliberate but fluid. Even in casual clothes, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that often went unnoticed by those too busy showing off. Unbeknownst to Lena, she had already caught the attention of one particular soldier. Corporal Ryan Maddox was the kind of man whose ego was inversely proportional to his intelligence. He had transferred to the base just a month prior and had a reputation for arrogance, especially after a few too many beers. When he first noticed Lena across the room, he saw calmness where he expected submission. A quiet woman in a bar, alone and polite. He thought he could break that composure with charm or intimidation. Both notions were disastrously wrong. Ryan watched her for a moment, studying her posture, the way she moved with control and awareness. His mind, already clouded by alcohol, twisted what he saw into an insult. How dare someone be calm in a room like this? How dare someone walk through his territory without noticing him? When Lena brushed past him to join her friends, her expression neutral, her eyes alert but disinterested, his ego was wounded. He had been ignored, dismissed, an unforgivable act in his world. Lena's friends were oblivious to the growing storm. They laughed, sipping their drinks, discussing mundane things, plans for the weekend, upcoming holidays, and work backlogs. Lena slid into the booth, keeping her back straight, arms relaxed on the table. She wanted nothing more than a peaceful night with them. But she sensed the subtle energy in the room, the tension from the corner where Ryan still stared. It wasn't unusual. Bars near bases often held a few overly confident soldiers testing boundaries. She merely hoped tonight wouldn't require intervention. Ryan finally approached, weaving through the crowd with an air of overconfidence. He wasn't thinking clearly. Every step toward her was fueled by wounded pride and a need to dominate, to assert control. By the time he reached the booth, his face was flushed, a combination of alcohol and anger. "Hey there," he said, voice dripping with fake charm. "You in some kind of special girl group or something?" The tone was mocking, patronizing, and deliberately designed to provoke. Lena didn't flinch. She raised her gaze slowly, meeting his eyes with calm precision. "I'm just here with friends. You should go back to your table," she replied, her voice steady and devoid of emotion. Nothing about her posture, her tone, or her expression gave him the reaction he craved. No flinch, no shock, no fear. Nothing. It enraged him further. In his mind, he was now facing a personal affront, a challenge to his authority, his masculinity, his ego. "Whoa, calm down, little lady. I'm just talking," he said, stepping closer, leaning over the booth. The smell of cheap beer hit Lena, but she remained composed. Her training kicked in automatically, every detail in the room noted: exits, obstacles, positions of other patrons, body language of potential threats. She assessed the situation in a heartbeat, calculating the risk and determining that Ryan was a threat, but not yet dangerous. Not yet. "Please step back," she said again, firmer this time. Her eyes didn't waver. Patrons nearby began to sense the tension. Some glanced at their drinks, uneasy, while others leaned in, curious about the brewing confrontation. Ryan, however, didn't step back. Instead, he smirked, misreading her calmness as hesitation. "Oh, you think you're tough, huh?" he slurred, his hand brushing her shoulder. It was a test, and Lena immediately recognized it for what it was, a challenge that could escalate quickly if not handled. Her friends tensed. Sarah whispered, "Lena, maybe we should just." But Lena shook her head ever so slightly, signaling she had it under control. In that instant, Ryan grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, yanking her toward him. His movement was clumsy, fueled by intoxication and ego rather than skill, but it was enough to provoke Lena's reflexive response. She twisted her body just so, loosening his grip and stepping back with precise balance. Her eyes never left his. The bar seemed to freeze. Conversations halted. Every patron now watched, sensing that something far more serious than a drunken insult was unfolding. Ryan, enraged and humiliated, shouted over the murmurs, "You think you're better than the rest of us?" Lena inhaled slowly, controlled and deliberate. "No, I just know how to handle myself. Step away before you get hurt." Her words were calm but unwavering, a warning that she was prepared to act if necessary. Ryan laughed, a harsh, nervous sound, and lunged forward. His movement was reckless, sloppy, and predictable. Lena shifted her stance slightly, every muscle coiled and ready. She didn't need to strike, she only needed to be ready. Patrons moved instinctively away, giving her space. At that moment, Lena was not just a woman in a bar, she was a trained operative, capable of neutralizing threats with efficiency and precision, and Ryan was about to find out just how unprepared he was. The scene held a tension that could have snapped at any moment. Lena's mind raced through scenarios: disarm, neutralize, protect friends, avoid escalation. Her years of special forces experience made the decision-making instantaneous. She had faced far more dangerous enemies than a drunken soldier, but the principle remained the same: control, precision, and restraint until necessary. Ryan's pride, however, had blinded him to all reason, and the night was only beginning to take a turn that no one would forget. Ryan Maddox, fueled by alcohol and wounded pride, refused to let the matter end quietly. Every polite word from Lena had felt like a personal insult, a public humiliation he couldn't tolerate. He wasn't accustomed to being ignored, especially by a woman who radiated calm authority without saying a word. The bar, once a place of casual laughter, had now shifted in energy. Patrons sensed the brewing storm. Conversations dropped to whispers, drinks sat half-finished, and all eyes gravitated toward the corner booth where Lena's quiet composure met Ryan's erratic aggression. Ryan leaned in closer, waving his hand as if to punctuate his authority. "What's your deal? You think you're better than all of us?" His voice carried a mixture of mockery and intoxicated bravado, intended to provoke fear or admiration. Lena didn't flinch. Her calm, steady gaze met his, and in that moment Ryan felt it. She was unshakable. It infuriated him. How could someone so small, so seemingly ordinary, command the room's attention without raising her voice, without moving aggressively? That was a skill he didn't understand, and a threat to his fragile ego. "I'm not here to prove anything," Lena said evenly, her voice cutting through the bar's low hum. "Step back or leave me alone." Her words were polite but unyielding. Patrons exchanged glances. Some were intrigued, some nervous, while others muttered under their breath about the audacity of the situation. Ryan, however, couldn't interpret calm as warning. He saw it as hesitation, a weakness ripe for exploitation. He puffed his chest, leaning over the booth, his hand brushing against Lena's shoulder again. "You're feisty, I'll give you that, but don't think you're untouchable." Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. She calculated the distance, the trajectory of his next move, the exits, the positions of everyone in the bar. Her body was relaxed, but her mind moved at lightning speed, each scenario running through her military-trained instincts. She had faced enemies trained in warfare, operating in far deadlier situations. This, by comparison, was simple, but dangerous because of its unpredictability. Drunk soldiers often acted without thinking. Ryan's actions were fueled by ego, alcohol, and insecurity, volatile ingredients. Her friends, Sarah and Mia, whispered urgently. "Maybe we should call security," Sarah suggested. Lena shook her head subtly. She didn't need help yet. This was a test, and she knew that if she remained calm, she could control the outcome. Any sudden or emotional reaction could escalate the situation unnecessarily. Lena's training wasn't about aggression. It was about observation, timing, and discipline. She had to neutralize the threat, yes, but with as little chaos as possible. Ryan, oblivious to her internal strategy, continued to provoke. He smirked, leaning closer, his words slurred but sharp with insult. "You think just because you talk calmly you're some kind of warrior. You're nothing like the real soldiers here." Lena didn't respond immediately. She let the silence stretch, letting the bar's atmosphere amplify Ryan's discomfort. Silence, she knew, could be more intimidating than a shout. Her body language remained open but alert, signaling that while she wasn't backing down, she wasn't making a move either. Ryan's frustration intensified. "Come on, speak up. I'm talking to you," Ryan barked, grabbing at her arm in a clumsy attempt to assert control. That was the spark Lena had anticipated. Instantly, she felt the tension in his muscles, the imbalance from his drunkenness. With a precise, practiced movement, she twisted her body slightly, freeing her arm while maintaining her balance. Her foot slid just a fraction, positioning her for leverage if he attacked further. The bar went quiet again, everyone sensing the moment had escalated beyond mere words. Ryan's face flushed with rage. "You think you can just ignore me?" he shouted, shoving her lightly. Lena didn't stumble, didn't flinch, but she stepped back deliberately, creating a safe distance while keeping her focus entirely on him. Her eyes didn't leave his. Her posture remained relaxed yet ready. Patrons instinctively moved back, giving her space. Some whispered to one another, uncertain if they should intervene. Others, soldiers themselves, recognized the subtle cues of someone trained in combat, the calculated stance, the controlled breathing, the poised readiness. It was impossible to ignore. "You need to stop," Lena said calmly, each word deliberate. "You're drunk, you're out of control, and you're making a scene. Walk away before this gets ugly." Her voice was steady, not raised, not threatening, but every syllable carried authority. Ryan misinterpreted it. Instead of reading it as a warning, he heard it as mockery, a challenge, a dare to prove himself. He stepped closer, his hand moving as if to grab her shoulder again. This was exactly the mistake Lena had anticipated. Her mind raced through options: disarm, neutralize, escape, contain. Each choice weighed the potential risk, the bystanders, the physical disparity, and the escalation threshold. Her training dictated precision and efficiency. She didn't want to hurt him, but she was fully prepared to neutralize the threat if necessary. Ryan's aggression, while clumsy, was dangerous precisely because he was unpredictable and drunk. That unpredictability made the situation volatile. The tension peaked. Patrons froze mid-drink, mid-conversation, sensing the imminent confrontation. Lena's calm contrasted with Ryan's erratic movements. She assessed him. He was off balance, overconfident, underestimating her. That miscalculation would be his downfall. Her friends' whispers grew frantic, but Lena's subtle gestures signaled them to stay calm and allow her to handle it. She knew that once the first physical move happened, there would be no stopping the rapid sequence that could follow. Control was essential. Ryan lunged forward suddenly, a wild, uncontrolled grab at her arm. Lena's instincts kicked in. She rotated her body slightly, redirecting his momentum, slipping out of his grasp, stepping aside, and maintaining her balance. Her movement was fluid, almost imperceptible, trained to turn a potentially dangerous grab into neutralized motion. Ryan stumbled, off balance, shocked that the woman he thought weak had such effortless control. Gasps filled the room. Patrons began murmuring, some whispering about her military background, sensing skill in her precision, even if they couldn't name it. Ryan's frustration boiled over. "You think you're untouchable," he slurred, stepping closer again. Lena's eyes narrowed fractionally. She calculated one more step from him and he might escalate physically. She remained calm, steady, ready. This was the critical moment, predictable yet dangerous. Her mind prepared for action, rehearsed in countless scenarios abroad, but with the added complexity of civilians and friends nearby. Every muscle was poised, every response calculated. The storm had arrived. And then came the moment when instinct overtook negotiation. Ryan reached for her again, but this time with more aggression. Lena's stance shifted subtly, ready to counter, neutralize, and control the threat. Patrons leaned back, sensing the imminent collision of training and ego, of preparation versus recklessness. What would happen next would change the course of the night, leaving everyone in the bar with a story they would never forget. The bar had grown quiet, but the energy in the room crackled like static electricity. Every patron sensed the shift, some frozen mid-drink, some leaning forward in anticipation. Lena Hart's calm composure stood in stark contrast to Corporal Ryan Maddox's erratic energy. He had been humiliated by her silence, and each polite, firm response from her seemed to fan the flames of his ego. Alcohol had clouded his judgment, pride had destroyed his caution. Every nerve in Lena's body was alert, every sense primed, but she refused to overreact. She would only act when necessary. Ryan's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "You're not walking away this time," he slurred, stepping closer. Patrons instinctively shuffled backward, creating a semicircle around the unfolding scene. Lena remained perfectly still, analyzing his stance. His left foot was slightly off balance from his previous movements. His grip tightened instinctively, seeking dominance. She noted the angle of his arm, the twitch in his shoulder, the way his eyes darted, not just at her but at the surrounding patrons as if measuring witnesses. He was dangerous, unpredictable, and drunk, a volatile combination. "Step back," Lena said, her tone calm yet unyielding. She was precise with her words. Each one carried authority without aggression. She was trained to neutralize threats without escalating unnecessarily, but the warning was clear: cross this line and she would act. Ryan misinterpreted her composure as hesitation, a weakness waiting to be exploited. Fueled by wounded pride, he stepped closer, brushing against her shoulder. The subtle contact sent a jolt through him, an unconscious assertion of his perceived dominance. Lena's patience was being tested. Before anyone could intervene, Ryan lunged forward, grabbing her wrist with a force that startled both her and the surrounding patrons. The motion was clumsy and imprecise, but the intent was clear: to dominate, to humiliate, to assert power. Lena's reflexes engaged instantly. With a subtle twist of her wrist and a slight pivot of her hips, she freed herself from his grip. The movement was fluid, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but it was enough to leave him off balance. The first lesson of the night had been taught silently. She was not an easy target. Ryan stumbled, but his frustration only intensified. He let out a sharp, bitter laugh, attempting to mask his humiliation. "You think that was clever?" he yelled, his voice carrying through the bar. Lena did not respond. She didn't need to. Every movement she had trained for years prepared her for situations like this. Not this exact scenario, but every principle applied. Keep the threat controlled, maintain situational awareness, protect bystanders, and act decisively when necessary. Each second that passed increased the tension. Ryan's ego, unchecked, was now a physical threat. "Enough," Lena said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through his angry rant. "Leave me alone, now." Her words were measured, deliberate, yet they carried the weight of experience. Ryan, intoxicated and enraged, mistook her warning for arrogance. He reached for her again, more aggressively this time. Lena noted his approach and adjusted her stance subtly, coiling her body in a defensive position, ready to respond instantly. Every muscle in her body was alert, every reflex primed. This wasn't about fear, it was about precision. The crowd around them froze. Some gasped, others held their breath. Patrons instinctively moved to create space, sensing the impending confrontation. Whispers ran through the bar: "Is she trained? Look at how calm she is." Lena's friends, seated just behind her, were tense, their hands hovering near their phones in case they needed to call security. But Lena remained composed. Her eyes never left Ryan's, unblinking, calculating every possibility. The calmness, she knew, was more disarming than any threat. Ryan's lack of control made him predictable, an advantage she would exploit if necessary. Ryan's next move was impulsive and clumsy. He stepped closer, extending his arm to grab her shoulder. Lena reacted instantly, sidestepping with precision, twisting her body to redirect his momentum. He stumbled, nearly colliding with a nearby table. Glasses rattled and the bar erupted in murmurs. Some soldiers muttered under their breath, recognizing her skill even without knowing her identity. Ryan's aggression, while untrained, was dangerous precisely because it was uncontrolled. Lena's training allowed her to neutralize his movements without escalating unnecessarily. Her calm had become her greatest weapon. "You're nothing," Ryan spat, his words slurred, but his eyes betrayed fear now, a tiny crack in his drunken arrogance. Lena's expression remained unchanged. She had predicted the psychological pattern, humiliation leading to aggression, leading to panic once the threat wasn't successful. Every movement he made was predictable because of this pattern. Her mind processed exit routes, potential strikes, and defensive measures simultaneously. She was prepared for what he might do next. Patrons leaned forward, sensing that the confrontation could escalate into a full-blown physical struggle. Ryan lunged again, this time more forceful, attempting to grab her wrist and pull her toward him. Lena shifted her weight, pivoting on her foot and using a subtle rotation of her hips to counter his momentum. His hand slid past her as she stepped aside, maintaining balance and composure. The bar was silent, everyone watching in disbelief. A soldier who had thought he could dominate a seemingly ordinary woman had just been outmaneuvered effortlessly. Lena's movements were almost poetic, precise, efficient, and controlled. She wasn't just defending herself, she was demonstrating mastery over chaos. Ryan's frustration now tipped toward desperation. He tried to shove her, attempting to intimidate her physically. Lena didn't flinch. She stepped back slightly, letting him overextend himself. Her body remained relaxed, every sense alert. Patrons whispered nervously, realizing that she wasn't reacting out of fear. She was analyzing, calculating, waiting for the right moment to act if necessary. Ryan, drunk and impulsive, didn't recognize the subtle control she exerted over the situation. His aggression was predictable. She had already accounted for the likely outcomes. Then it happened. Ryan, blinded by pride and anger, reached for her again, this time with both hands, trying to grab her forcefully. Lena anticipated the move. She rotated her body, letting his momentum carry him forward while keeping herself balanced. Her movement was controlled, measured, and precise, trained thousands of times during simulations and real combat situations. Ryan stumbled, nearly falling into the corner of a table. The crowd gasped. Patrons whispered, some pulling out phones to record the near catastrophe. Lena's calmness contrasted sharply with his erratic aggression, making him appear small and out of control. For a moment, the entire bar held its collective breath. Ryan's ego, fueled by humiliation and alcohol, had driven him past the threshold of reason. Lena's steady demeanor, her calculated movements, and her unflinching gaze were a silent warning. Continue, and there would be consequences. Patrons realized the quiet woman was more capable than anyone had imagined. Ryan, finally sensing that his attempts to intimidate were failing, hesitated. The brief pause was all Lena needed to maintain control. She knew that escalation was imminent, and she was ready. Ryan's frustration turned to rage, his drunken judgment clouding his awareness. He shoved Lena again, but she was ready. She pivoted, deflecting his shove, maintaining her balance, and subtly positioning herself for the next necessary step. Patrons leaned forward, witnessing skill and discipline in action, unaware they were watching a real-life demonstration of special forces training applied outside the battlefield. Lena didn't raise her voice. She didn't panic. She controlled the situation with precision, anticipating every movement, prepared to neutralize the threat should Ryan make a critical error. The tension was palpable. Every observer felt it. A drunk, aggressive soldier versus a trained, composed operative. Lena's friends whispered nervously, but Lena's eyes never left Ryan's. Her body, her breathing, her stance, all conveyed readiness, confidence, and lethal control. Ryan, meanwhile, teetered between aggression and fear. He couldn't understand how someone could remain so calm while being provoked so deliberately. Every instinct in him screamed at the moment to act, to assert dominance, but he was already behind, reacting rather than leading. The night had reached a dangerous electric climax. The bar had grown still, the previous chatter evaporating into tense silence. Every patron now held their breath, sensing the inevitable escalation. Captain Lena Hart's calm composure contrasted sharply with Corporal Ryan Maddox's escalating rage. He had been humiliated repeatedly, his attempts at dominance failing at every turn. Alcohol had dulled his reasoning, and pride had replaced judgment. Now, the storm that had been brewing for hours was about to break. Every second counted. Every movement had consequences. Lena's training had prepared her for chaos far deadlier than a drunken soldier, but even she understood the danger of unpredictability in a crowded civilian setting. Ryan lunged forward suddenly, his hands wrapping around Lena's throat in a clumsy but forceful choke. Patrons screamed and froze. Time seemed to slow in Lena's mind as she assessed the situation. Ryan's strength, his momentum, the distance to bystanders, the exit routes, and the positions of nearby furniture. Her training activated instinctively. This was a threat that demanded immediate neutralization. She had seconds, perhaps less, to prevent serious harm. Her mind split into tactical calculations. Defend, control, protect bystanders, and neutralize the threat efficiently. Every muscle tensed, ready for precise action. Lena's first instinct was to create leverage and escape the choke. She rotated her shoulders and twisted her wrist in a fluid, practiced motion, redirecting Ryan's momentum off-center. His grip loosened slightly, just enough for her to pivot her body and step to the side. The bar erupted in gasps. Patrons instinctively moved back, giving her space. Lena's stance was firm, her feet planted strategically, prepared for the next escalation. Ryan, caught off guard, overextended and stumbled forward. His face contorted with surprise and frustration. For the first time, he sensed that he had miscalculated. He was facing someone who would not be dominated easily. Instead of striking recklessly, Lena maintained control, a principle drilled into her over countless training hours. Every movement was precise, calculated to neutralize the threat while minimizing harm. Her pivot had unbalanced Ryan and put him in a vulnerable position. She placed a foot behind his ankle, subtly guiding his body down as she applied controlled pressure to maintain dominance. The bar's spectators watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how effortlessly she countered a fully grown, aggressive soldier. Lena's focus never wavered. Her mind ran multiple scenarios simultaneously, anticipating every desperate move Ryan might attempt. Ryan, furious and humiliated, tried to recover, his arms flailing as he attempted to re-establish his grip. Lena's next action was instinctive, flawless. With one precise step, she used his own momentum to throw him to the floor in a controlled takedown. He crashed onto the ground with a thud, gasping and momentarily stunned. The force was enough to neutralize him without causing permanent harm, a testament to Lena's expertise in controlled combat. She maintained her position above him, every movement measured, her breathing steady, eyes locked on his for any sign of renewed aggression. The bar erupted into a mixture of awe and fear. Patrons whispered frantically, some reaching for phones to record the astonishing display. "Did she just?" one soldier muttered, his voice trailing off in disbelief. Lena's friends sat frozen, their hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, realizing just how close the situation had come to catastrophe. Lena's expression remained calm, almost serene, though her mind was fully aware of the volatile environment. Ryan, still on the floor, gasped, his aggression replaced by shock and growing fear. He had underestimated her entirely, and that error could have cost him. As Ryan struggled beneath her, Lena applied a controlled hold, just enough to prevent him from rising without harming him. Her training emphasized restraint. Overkill was unnecessary and dangerous, particularly in a crowded bar. Patrons instinctively kept their distance, giving her room to maintain control. Lena's mind ran through the potential outcomes. Call security, ensure bystanders remain safe, neutralize the threat completely if he resisted further. She had prepared for worse in combat zones, yet the principles remained the same: precision, control, and situational awareness. Ryan finally spoke, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. I didn't mean," he stammered. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. Words were useless until the physical threat was contained. She relaxed just enough to allow him a fraction of space but kept a firm hold on his posture, ensuring he could not lunge again. "Stop struggling. You've crossed a line," she said calmly, her tone controlled but authoritative. "I warned you. You chose this." Her words carried weight far beyond the bar's walls, a combination of discipline and undeniable authority that left everyone present in awe. Security personnel had finally arrived, rushing toward the scene. They assumed Lena was the aggressor initially, their hands hovering near her as they prepared to intervene. She didn't panic. Instead, she calmly moved aside, allowing them to see Ryan pinned beneath her. Her eyes flicked briefly to the nearest exit and to her friends, silently signaling that the situation was under control. Security hesitated, recognizing the precision and restraint in her movements, a silent testament to professional training. For the first time, some patrons began to whisper that she might be military, special forces perhaps, though no one could confirm. The next few moments were critical. Ryan, now fully sobering from fear, attempted to push himself up but realized the futility instantly. Lena's hold was flawless, control without excessive force. The bar watched as he froze, a dawning realization on his face. He had assaulted someone who could neutralize him in seconds. His arrogance, his drunken confidence, his pride had all been shattered simultaneously. He gasped, confusion and fear overtaking his earlier aggression. Patrons whispered rapidly among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others exchanging worried glances. Lena finally allowed security to assist in guiding Ryan to a standing position. She stepped back, hands relaxed, posture calm, giving them space to intervene. The entire bar seemed to exhale collectively, the tension finally dissipating. Patrons were stunned not only by the display of skill, but also by her composure under threat. She hadn't raised her voice unnecessarily, hadn't struck with intent to harm, yet she had completely neutralized a much larger, aggressive opponent. Her restraint made the situation look almost effortless, an expert display of self-defense under pressure. Ryan, still shaking, avoided eye contact. Humiliation washed over him as he processed what had just happened. He had attacked a woman, a stranger in a crowded bar, and she had overpowered him without injuring him. Fear now replaced arrogance, confusion replaced drunken bravado. The military principle he had ignored, respect for fellow soldiers, awareness of rank, and caution around unknown skill sets, was now painfully evident. Patrons muttered quietly, the murmurs filled with a mix of awe, respect, and disbelief. Lena's presence commanded authority, not through words or aggression, but through calm, disciplined action. Finally, Lena released her controlled hold, stepping back fully. She straightened, eyes scanning the room, still aware of every detail, potential threats, bystanders, and possible reinforcements. Security now stepped in completely, checking on Ryan, who muttered apologies that were half-formed and incoherent. Lena's friends rushed forward, concern etched on their faces, but she waved them off subtly, signaling she was fine. Her heart rate was steady, her mind alert but controlled. Every muscle in her body relaxed gradually, a demonstration of training transitioning from life-or-death combat mode to situational awareness in a civilian environment. The bar erupted in whispered amazement. Patrons who had watched the entire confrontation began speculating, identifying her as someone far beyond ordinary. Soldiers who knew of her reputation silently acknowledged her skill. The contrast between Ryan's failed aggression and Lena's controlled response left an indelible impression on everyone present. Even those unfamiliar with military discipline sensed that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Lena's calmness, her precision, and her restraint elevated her presence to something almost legendary in the minds of those watching. As Ryan was escorted to a nearby chair by security, he realized the gravity of his mistakes. Lena had warned him repeatedly, had given him multiple opportunities to disengage, yet his arrogance and intoxication had brought him to the brink. He had assaulted a highly trained Special Forces operative and paid the price in humiliation, fear, and awe. Lena remained composed, her calm demeanor unbroken. She had neutralized the threat, protected bystanders, and maintained discipline throughout. Patrons whispered in disbelief. A drunken, aggressive soldier had been overpowered by a quiet woman who hadn't raised her voice or lost control even once. Lena's gaze swept the bar, assessing the environment, ensuring the situation was fully resolved. Her friends approached her cautiously, hands shaking from adrenaline, and she offered a reassuring nod. Security personnel murmured apologies as they processed the scene, now fully aware of her credentials and skill. Lena's mind, trained for war zones and unpredictable combat, relaxed slightly. The confrontation had been contained perfectly through precision, calm, and mastery of instinctive combat. She had demonstrated what few could: control under pressure, lethal capability without unnecessary force, and authority commanded by presence and discipline. The bar remained in stunned silence, the air thick with tension and disbelief. Patrons whispered among themselves, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A drunken corporal had attempted to physically dominate a woman, only to be neutralized with astonishing precision and restraint. Everyone could see it. This wasn't just self-defense. The way she moved, the calmness in her eyes, the control over every aspect of the chaotic situation, it was the mark of someone trained beyond ordinary limits. Nobody dared speak. They simply watched, captivated, unsure how to react. Security personnel had fully intervened now, guiding Ryan to a chair in the corner, his face pale and his bravado completely extinguished. "You need to calm down," one guard said, though his tone lacked the authority to mask his own disbelief. Lena remained standing a few feet away, her posture still composed, her breathing steady. Her hands rested casually at her sides, but every movement was deliberate. Every muscle was relaxed yet ready, a perfect display of controlled discipline. Her calm aura dominated the room, leaving Ryan stunned and the onlookers mesmerized. The murmurs began to rise. "Who is she?" a young soldier asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen anyone move like that," another replied. Several patrons speculated she must be military, though none could guess the magnitude of her experience. Lena's friends, Sarah and Mia, finally recovered from their initial shock. Their hearts were still racing from the adrenaline, but relief washed over them seeing her unharmed. Sarah leaned in and whispered, "Lena, what just happened?" Lena's lips curved slightly, a hint of a smile. "He made a mistake," she said simply, as if the entire ordeal had been routine. It was then that Lena reached into her pocket and produced her military ID. Her movements were calm, fluid, and deliberate. Security personnel, initially unsure of her status, now leaned in closer. Lena extended the ID, flipping it so the insignia and rank were clearly visible. "Captain Lena Hart," she said softly but firmly. "U.S. Special Forces. I was acting in self-defense." The words hung in the air, their weight carrying authority far beyond anything spoken before. The bar grew silent once more. Patrons craned their necks, their curiosity piqued, whispering to one another. Ryan froze. He had been staring at Lena moments before in defiance and frustration, and now shock and dawning fear replaced his arrogance. "Wait, you're Special Forces," he stammered, disbelief heavy in his voice. His mind raced, piecing together everything that had happened, the effortless dodges, the pivots, the takedown, the control. All of it suddenly made sense. The humiliation, the fear, the panic. It wasn't his failure alone. It was the failure of arrogance against someone who had been trained for far worse. He had assumed strength came from aggression, but Lena had proven it came from precision, discipline, and calm authority. Some of the soldiers nearby, recognizing the insignia and rank, whispered among themselves, their voices filled with awe. "That's Captain Hart, she's in Special Forces," one muttered. "She's one of them, the real deal." The murmurs spread quickly. Patrons who didn't know her name still sensed her power. Even Ryan's colleagues, who had initially laughed at his bravado, now regarded him with a mix of pity and incredulity. He had publicly assaulted someone far beyond his capability, and the lesson would not be forgotten. Lena remained calm throughout. She didn't gloat, didn't flaunt her rank, and didn't show anger. She simply assessed the situation. Ryan was no longer a physical threat, the bar patrons were safe, and her friends were unharmed. She spoke to security, her tone even and authoritative. "Check if he's okay. He's been subdued, but I don't want anyone hurt unnecessarily." The guards nodded, clearly respecting both her presence and her measured handling of the incident. This was not aggression. It was professionalism, a display of skill honed over years of rigorous training. Ryan, now seated and trembling, tried to speak, but his words faltered. I didn't know, I just—" His voice broke under the weight of realization. He had been arrogant, intoxicated, and dismissive, and it had led him into a confrontation with someone who could neutralize him without effort. Every soldier in the bar watched, some nodding to themselves in silent acknowledgement of the lesson being learned. Lena's calm had turned a potentially violent encounter into a controlled situation, and everyone had witnessed it firsthand. The bar's energy shifted. Patrons who had been tense and anxious now whispered in admiration. Lena's friends approached her cautiously. "Lena, that was incredible," Mia said, voice still trembling. Lena smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and understated pride. "It's over," she replied simply. "He won't be a threat again." The subtle confidence in her words, combined with the visible control she had maintained, left a lasting impression on everyone present. The incident was already becoming legendary in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Military police arrived shortly thereafter, summoned by security. Statements were taken from Ryan, from Lena, and from multiple witnesses. Lena remained calm, factual, and professional throughout. She recounted the events clearly, emphasizing that she had warned him repeatedly and acted only when necessary to protect herself. Her account was corroborated by numerous patrons. It became clear that she had done nothing wrong beyond defending herself against an aggressive, intoxicated individual. The official recognition of her conduct solidified her authority and further highlighted Ryan's mistakes. Ryan, facing the consequences of his actions, was pale and silent. He could no longer rely on bravado or aggression. Every witness had seen the truth. He had been overpowered by a woman who had trained far beyond his capabilities. The humiliation was compounded by the fact that she had shown restraint at every step. For Ryan, the encounter was a wake-up call, a confrontation that shattered his illusions of strength and dominance. Lena, on the other hand, remained poised, her composure unbroken, her discipline intact. As the investigation progressed, the story of what had happened spread across the base and even into nearby civilian circles. Soldiers who had been present recounted the events to colleagues, embellishing some details but emphasizing the key fact. Lena Hart, Special Forces captain, had been confronted by a drunken soldier, and she had neutralized him flawlessly without harming anyone. The story inspired admiration, respect, and a cautious fear in those who heard it. Lena had turned a potentially dangerous situation into a lesson in discipline, control, and professionalism. Finally, Lena allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She checked on her friends who were still shaken but relieved. She reassured them, her calm demeanor soothing the lingering tension. Security and military police continued to manage the situation, escorting Ryan to a side room for further questioning and evaluation. Lena remained in the bar, quietly observing, her eyes scanning the room, ensuring that all bystanders remained safe and the situation was fully resolved. Even after the confrontation, her awareness never wavered, a hallmark of her training. The incident marked a turning point, not just for Ryan but for everyone who witnessed it. The lesson was clear: appearances can be deceiving. Calmness and precision often outmatch aggression and brute force. Lena had demonstrated that strength lies not in size or volume but in control, discipline, and expertise. For Ryan, the humiliation and fear would be a lasting memory. For the patrons, it was a lesson in respect and caution. And for Lena, it was a confirmation of the value of her training, applied effectively outside of the battlefield. By the time Lena and her friends left the bar later that night, the crowd had returned to a semblance of normalcy, though whispers of the event lingered in every corner. Patrons exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in awe, others nodding with newfound understanding. Lena had not sought recognition, but she had earned it nonetheless. The night had begun as a simple attempt at relaxation, yet it had transformed into a demonstration of control, courage, and expertise, an unforgettable lesson for all who had witnessed it firsthand. The morning after the incident, word had already spread across the base and into nearby civilian circles. The story of what had happened at the bar, the drunken corporal, the attempted intimidation, and the impeccable neutralization by Captain Lena Hart, had grown into a legendary retelling in mere hours. Soldiers whispered to one another in disbelief, repeating the events as if trying to reconcile what they had seen. Even those who had not witnessed the altercation firsthand were captivated by the tale. Lena, however, remained focused, disciplined, and detached, aware that the real consequences were only beginning. Military police were conducting their investigation. Ryan Maddox, still shaken from the previous night, was under formal questioning. He had been lodged in a temporary holding room for the night, given time to sober and reflect. Now, faced with the official process, his arrogance was gone, replaced by anxiety and regret. He sat stiffly in the chair, avoiding eye contact with the officers. His actions had not only endangered himself but had risked serious injury in a public setting, and the chain of command was not about to let such recklessness go unpunished. Captain Lena Hart arrived at the base administrative office to provide her formal statement. She walked in with her usual quiet confidence, her posture straight, her gaze calm yet authoritative. Even in civilian clothes, she exuded the presence of someone accustomed to command and respect. The military police officers greeted her professionally, nodding the insignia on her ID. She took a seat and recounted the events in precise detail, leaving nothing to ambiguity. Every movement, every word, every warning given to Ryan was documented with accuracy. She described her tactical responses, emphasizing that she had acted in self-defense and with complete restraint, ensuring that no bystanders were harmed. Her testimony was met with nods of acknowledgement. The officers recognized her expertise and professionalism immediately. She did not exaggerate her abilities or the situation. Instead, she provided a clear and methodical account. The investigation had to be thorough, but there was no doubt about her credibility. Witness statements from bar patrons corroborated Lena's story, noting her calm composure, precision, and the effectiveness of her actions. Many witnesses also reported the visible fear and confusion on Ryan's face as the confrontation unfolded, highlighting the stark contrast between her control and his recklessness. Ryan, now aware of the gravity of his situation, attempted to explain himself. I didn't mean to," he began, his voice shaky. One officer cut him off. "Intent is not your defense here, Maddox. You physically assaulted a superior trained in combat in a public space. Your actions are a breach of discipline and conduct." The words hit him like a sledgehammer. He had believed his arrogance and alcohol would shield him from consequences, but the reality was stark and unavoidable. The weight of military law, combined with eyewitness accounts, left little room for excuses. The formal review board convened shortly afterward. Lena presented herself in full uniform this time, her demeanor impeccable. The panel of officers listened attentively as she recounted not only the events but the reasoning behind every movement she made during the confrontation. Her explanation was meticulous, demonstrating not only skill but adherence to military principles, restraint, protection of civilians, and proportional response. The panel was impressed by her ability to remain calm under stress and her foresight in anticipating potential risks. Her professionalism reinforced the credibility of her account. Ryan's turn came next. The board observed him nervously, his confidence shattered. He attempted to justify his behavior, citing alcohol, stress, and frustration. However, his explanations fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. Eyewitness accounts painted a clear picture. Lena had warned him repeatedly, had provided opportunities to disengage, and had only acted to protect herself when he refused to heed her warnings. His actions were reckless, irresponsible, and unacceptable, and the board made note of the complete disparity between his conduct and Lena's disciplined response. The consequences for Ryan were swift and uncompromising. He faced formal reprimand, mandatory disciplinary training, and a temporary suspension from duty. The message from the chain of command was clear. Aggression, arrogance, and reckless behavior would not be tolerated, especially against trained personnel. The humiliation he experienced during the bar incident was now compounded by official sanction. Soldiers across the base would hear of the consequences, serving as a cautionary tale of the dangers of underestimating others and overestimating oneself. Meanwhile, Lena's actions received praise from her peers and superiors alike. She had managed a potentially volatile situation with precision and restraint, demonstrating leadership in an unexpected context. While she did not seek recognition, her professionalism and skill were acknowledged formally, reinforcing her reputation as a capable and disciplined officer. Commanding officers emphasized that her response reflected the highest standards of military conduct, control, effectiveness, and consideration for the safety of bystanders. The bar itself became a topic of conversation across the base. Patrons who had witnessed the confrontation were interviewed for official records, confirming the accuracy of Lena's account. Their testimony further solidified the understanding that she had acted with restraint, professionalism, and expertise. Even civilian witnesses were impressed, noting that the calm, calculated nature of her responses contrasted sharply with Ryan's chaotic and reckless aggression. The incident became more than a bar fight. It was a lesson in discipline, respect, and authority. Ryan, reflecting on the events, realized the depth of his errors. His assumptions about dominance and strength had been completely shattered. He had failed to read the signs, underestimated a trained professional, and allowed intoxication and ego to dictate his actions. The consequences were not merely disciplinary, they were deeply personal. Every soldier who knew of the incident would now remember his humiliation and her composure. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his career, one that underscored respect, awareness, and restraint. As the day progressed, Lena returned to her normal routine. She checked on her team, ensuring they were aware of the incident and the outcome, but did not dwell on it. Her professionalism demanded focus on current missions and responsibilities, not past events. The incident had been handled, and she had ensured safety and discipline throughout. Her example would ripple through the base, teaching soldiers the importance of composure, observation, and the effective application of training in unpredictable situations. The story of the bar incident, however, continued to circulate informally. Soldiers recounted the events in hushed tones, emphasizing Lena's calmness, her skill, and the dramatic consequences for Ryan. The lesson became ingrained. Appearances can deceive, and underestimating someone trained in special forces could have serious consequences. Lena's actions had transformed a potential disaster into a lesson in authority, control, and professionalism, a scenario that would be remembered and retold for months to come. By evening, Ryan had been officially processed and informed of his consequences. He left the administrative office with a pale face, subdued and humbled. The incident had reshaped his understanding of authority, discipline, and the unpredictable nature of human skill. For Lena, the day concluded quietly, her reputation intact, her professionalism undisputed, and her skills recognized not just by those in her immediate chain of command, but by anyone who had witnessed or heard of her actions. The days following the bar incident saw subtle but significant changes throughout the base. Lena Hart's reputation, already respected within her unit, had now spread far beyond. Soldiers who had witnessed her composure firsthand spoke in hushed tones about the night she had neutralized a drunken corporal without raising her voice or causing unnecessary harm. Those who hadn't seen it heard the story from colleagues, often with a sense of disbelief and admiration. The tale grew slightly with each retelling, but the core truth remained clear. Lena Hart was not someone to underestimate. Her actions had created a ripple effect. Soldiers, particularly the younger ones, began to approach interactions differently. They were more conscious of respect, aware of the potential consequences of arrogance, and reminded daily of the difference between bravado and skill. Lena's calm and controlled presence became a point of reference, not through intimidation, but through demonstration of competence. Even senior officers, who had long recognized her abilities, noted the incident in evaluations and informal discussions. Her composure in a civilian setting reaffirmed what many already knew. She could lead under pressure in any environment. Ryan Maddox's return to the unit was a stark contrast. His earlier arrogance had been completely replaced with a mixture of humiliation, wariness, and lingering fear. He approached colleagues quietly, avoiding eye contact, and spent days reflecting on the consequences of his reckless behavior. Some officers remarked on the dramatic shift in his attitude, noting that the incident had been a rare, though highly effective, lesson in discipline. Ryan's peers noticed too. Where he had once projected dominance, he now moved cautiously, aware that misjudging others, even those he assumed weaker or less experienced, could have serious repercussions. Lena, meanwhile, maintained her professionalism. She did not boast or capitalize on the incident. Instead, she continued her duties with quiet authority, her focus on missions and training unwavering. Her friends, Sarah and Mia, had shared in her relief after the incident, but they were also witnesses to the subtle shift in perception among those around her. Colleagues treated her with a renewed respect, their recognition not born of fear but of acknowledgement of skill, discipline, and judgment. The incident had elevated her standing, but she handled it with the same calm dignity that had defined her response in the bar. In training exercises, the story of the bar incident became an unspoken lesson. Instructors referenced it indirectly, emphasizing the importance of situational awareness, restraint, and tactical thinking in unpredictable environments. Lena's peers observed her interactions more closely, noting her composed decision-making and her ability to control a situation without aggression. The incident served as a reminder that skill and calm often outmatch raw strength or impulsive behavior. Even within informal circles, soldiers would reference the night as a case study. When discipline, training, and composure are applied correctly, chaos can be controlled and threats neutralized efficiently. Ryan's reintegration into the unit was carefully monitored. Officers wanted to ensure he had internalized the lessons of the incident. His duties were adjusted temporarily, with increased oversight and mentoring from senior non-commissioned officers. They emphasized accountability, respect, and awareness, key qualities he had failed to demonstrate during the bar confrontation. The humiliation he had experienced, paired with the formal consequences, left a lasting impression. In training exercises, Ryan moved cautiously, measured his actions, and, while still competent, now carried a visible hesitation when confronting situations he did not fully understand. The fear of misjudging someone like Lena Hart lingered in his mind. For the soldiers who had witnessed the bar incident, the story became a mix of cautionary tale and inspiration. Lena's approach demonstrated that true strength wasn't physical alone. It was rooted in training, foresight, and the ability to remain composed under pressure. The younger soldiers, particularly those new to the unit, were taught to observe, assess, and act with discipline rather than impulsive aggression. Lena's example became a living demonstration of these principles. In practical exercises and team-building missions, the lessons from that night were reflected. Anticipation, awareness, and controlled response were valued as much as raw power or speed. The incident also strengthened Lena's leadership credibility. Soldiers who might have doubted her capabilities now had undeniable proof of her skills and judgment. Her calm handling of a high-stakes, unpredictable confrontation outside of operational missions demonstrated a level of professionalism and competence that commanded respect. Orders given by Lena carried weight not simply because of rank, but because colleagues recognized her ability to think clearly and act decisively when circumstances required it. The incident reinforced her authority both formally and informally, creating an environment where discipline and respect were aligned. Ryan's interactions with Lena became significantly more cautious. He avoided unnecessary conflict, treated her with visible deference, and approached her only when required for professional reasons. The embarrassment of being outmaneuvered and restrained in front of the bar's patrons and his colleagues lingered. He became a more reflective soldier, sometimes painfully aware of his own flaws, and the memory of Lena's composure haunted him in moments where ego might have previously dictated behavior. His career, once marked by arrogance and recklessness, now bore the indelible mark of that night. One mistake, one encounter, one lesson he could never forget. The civilian staff who had been present at the bar also played a role in shaping the aftermath. Patrons who had witnessed the event recounted the story with amazement and respect, describing Lena as a figure of discipline and power. Social circles outside the base began to hear the story, adding layers to her reputation. For Lena, the recognition was incidental. Her focus remained on professionalism, duty, and readiness. Yet she could not deny that the incident had created an aura of respect that followed her both on and off the base, changing the way people perceived her presence in subtle but meaningful ways. Even months later, references to the incident would surface in informal discussions. Soldiers cited the bar confrontation when teaching younger members about restraint, awareness, and effective decision-making. Ryan, still learning to navigate the aftermath, carried the memory as a constant reminder of what happens when ego overtakes judgment. Lena's example became synonymous with composure under pressure. Her actions had transformed a potential disaster into a defining moment of leadership, skill, and professionalism. What began as a single night in a bar had evolved into a lasting story of respect, caution, and the power of controlled expertise. By the end of the year, Lena Hart's peers and superiors acknowledged her actions formally. She received commendations for her conduct, both for demonstrating exemplary restraint and for maintaining professionalism in a high-risk civilian confrontation. Her leadership had been proven in a unique scenario, and the lessons extended beyond the individual level to the entire unit. The night of the bar incident became a reference point. When faced with unexpected aggression, remain calm, evaluate the threat, and neutralize it with precision. Always protect bystanders, always maintain control. For Ryan Maddox, the incident remained a personal turning point. His reckless aggression had been met with an overwhelming demonstration of skill, and he learned to respect expertise regardless of assumptions. His peers watched his transformation with interest, noting the shift from arrogance to careful reflection. Lena's influence, though indirect, had reshaped the dynamics of the unit. Discipline, respect, and awareness were now more clearly valued than reckless bravado. The lessons from that night resonated far beyond the bar, influencing behavior, leadership, and decision-making in ways few could have predicted. Months had passed since the incident at the bar, yet its effects lingered across the base and within Lena Hart's circle. While she rarely spoke of the night, the impact of her actions continued to resonate, both among her peers and those she had indirectly influenced. Lena's reputation had evolved beyond that of a capable officer. She had become a living example of discipline, calm under pressure, and mastery of skill tempered with restraint. For many soldiers, her presence was now synonymous with authority earned through experience rather than rank alone. Ryan Maddox, whose arrogance had led him into the confrontation, had quietly undergone a transformation. He no longer approached interactions with bravado, his movements measured, his words tempered. The humiliation of that night had left an indelible mark, forcing him to recognize that skill, training, and calm could outweigh aggression at every turn. Over time, he began to focus on improving himself, attending extra training sessions and observing senior soldiers' strategies. While his progress was slow and sometimes awkward, his willingness to learn signified the first real steps toward maturity. He carried the memory of Lena's composure as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Lena herself had not sought recognition. Her professionalism demanded focus on her missions, her unit, and the responsibilities she held as a special forces captain. Yet, the acknowledgement of her peers and the broader military community subtly reinforced her leadership. During exercises, soldiers observed her approach to problem-solving, conflict resolution, and teamwork, often citing the bar incident as a case study. It was no longer simply a story of a drunken corporal meeting his match. It had become a lesson in decision-making, restraint, and effective leadership under unpredictable conditions. The bar, once just a casual spot for off-duty gatherings, had become a quiet symbol in unofficial discussions, a place where the potential consequences of arrogance had been made painfully clear. Soldiers recounted the events with reverence and caution, emphasizing Lena's ability to maintain control. Her presence, even in civilian spaces, reminded everyone that discipline and training were not confined to operational theaters. They were habits that carried through all aspects of life. Her actions had demonstrated that preparedness, observation, and calculated response could prevent chaos from escalating into catastrophe. Even outside the military context, Lena's story began to inspire those who learned of it. Friends, family, and colleagues who heard the tale were struck not only by her skill but by the principles she embodied: calmness in adversity, respect for life and bystanders, and precision in action. It was not the act of physical dominance that commanded attention. It was the intelligence, strategy, and ethical application of her abilities. In a world that often rewards aggression or spectacle, Lena's restraint and control offered a different model, one that emphasized mastery without recklessness. Ryan, reflecting on his journey since that night, began to understand the broader lessons. His initial mistakes were driven by ego, intoxication, and a fundamental underestimation of someone else's capabilities. Yet through guidance, mentoring, and self-reflection, he recognized the value of humility, discipline, and respect. While his relationship with Lena remained professional, it was now grounded in acknowledgement of her expertise and his own limitations. The experience became a turning point, shaping his approach to leadership and conflict in ways he could never have anticipated before that night. Lena, for her part, carried the memory of the bar incident with measured detachment. She did not dwell on it, yet it reinforced her understanding of the unpredictable nature of human behavior and the importance of readiness at all times. Every encounter, every mission, every interaction became a reminder that discipline, observation, and calm decisiveness were not just tactical advantages, they were moral imperatives. By neutralizing a threat without unnecessary harm, she had preserved life, demonstrated authority, and modeled professionalism in a way that would outlast the immediate incident. Her unit continued to thrive, influenced by the lessons embodied by Lena's example. New soldiers entering the unit were briefed indirectly about the importance of awareness, restraint, and precision. Training exercises were infused with hypothetical scenarios reminiscent of the bar incident, a reminder that unpredictability could arise anywhere, and the principles of control, discipline, and ethical response were universally applicable. Lena's actions, though a singular event, became a cornerstone of the unit's evolving culture, emphasizing that true leadership involves foresight, calm execution, and unwavering integrity. The broader military community took notice as well. Officers and commanders referenced the story as an example of exemplary conduct in a civilian setting. Reports highlighted her professionalism, the restraint exercised despite provocation, and her ability to maintain authority while minimizing risk to bystanders. The incident became a quiet legend, repeated in formal and informal circles alike, not as a sensational tale of violence, but as a study in discipline, training, and the ethical application of force. Lena's legacy, already built through years of service, was now enriched by a moment of clarity, courage, and precision that extended beyond any single mission. As time passed, Ryan became a cautionary example, his growth tempered by experience and reflection. He learned to approach conflicts with assessment rather than assumption, observation rather than aggression. The memory of that night, once a source of humiliation, became a guidepost for measured behavior. His peers, having witnessed the transformation, regarded him with a mixture of sympathy and cautious respect. Lena's influence had extended far beyond the immediate confrontation. She had altered behavior, reshaped perceptions, and imparted lessons without needing to enforce them directly. For Lena Hart, the night at the bar became a quiet, personal benchmark. It reminded her that skill without restraint is reckless, and that courage coupled with control is transformative. She had acted decisively, preserved life, and commanded respect, all while embodying the principles of leadership that had guided her throughout her career. The incident, once a flashpoint of chaos, had evolved into a lasting story of strength tempered by ethics, a demonstration of skill in service of safety, and a testament to the power of calm, precise action under pressure. In the end, the bar incident faded from immediate memory for most, but for those who had witnessed it or been directly affected, it became a legend. The night a soldier underestimated a woman, and a special forces captain taught a lesson that resonated far beyond the walls of that crowded civilian space. Lena Hart returned to her duties, her life unchanged outwardly, yet forever marked by a moment that reinforced the timeless truths of discipline, respect, and the quiet power of mastery tempered by restraint. The story lingered not in notoriety, but in the principles it had revealed. True strength is measured not in aggression or intimidation, but in preparation, composure, and the ability to act decisively and ethically when the world tests you. And Lena Hart, captain of Special Forces, had proven that night that those qualities could change lives, shape behavior, and leave an enduring impact far greater than any single display of force ever could.